We now have a good understanding of Ibn Khaldun and Sima Qian's lives and works. What are their similarities? Let's list out shared traits between them. First, their tough political experience. Both of these historians were far from living from ivory towers. They had first-hand experience of the political upheavals of their respective times, and even had a hand in shaping some of the most defining moments in their history. After facing difficult life events, they both chose to document their experiences and share them with the world, investing the last decades of their lives into writing. Ibn Khaldun had a long and tumultuous political career before his 40s. He served princes in the Maghreb and Al-Andalus and was involved in military battles and diplomatic missions. However, after experiencing palace intrigues, multiple attacks from desert nomads, and years of captivity in prison, he decided to leave the dangerous world of politics. Ibn Khaldun abruptly relocated to a remote area near the Algerian desert and wrote the Muqaddimah, the introduction to the Kitab al-Ibar, quote-unquote. I completed the Muqaddimah in that remarkable manner, to which I was inspired by that retreat, with words and ideas pouring into my head like cream into a churn, until the finished product was ready. End of quote. Sima Qian experienced firsthand the expeditions of the Great Wall, and even advised the Emperor Han Wudi on military matters. He decided to write his Shiji after his father died, and even kept writing despite the consequences of his ruler's punishment. His and Ibn Khaldun's life stories surely impacted their perspectives on history, as both actively assisted or observed events of their time. Second, their emphasis on nomads. Ibn Khaldun and Sima Qian had one very significant viewpoint in common. They both recognized the major difference that existed in pre-modern times between nomads and city dwellers. Nomads here must not be understood in the literal sense. Nomads in pre-modern times were not just wanderers. They lived in tribal groups and moved according to a fixed seasonal cycle in order to feed their animals. They had to be familiar with their environment and, in some cases, these people even evolved into proto-states. But they did not have the luxury of traveling at will. They often depended on farmers and cities for more sophisticated products and supplementary foods. These nomads were conquered when very weak, traded when weak, raided when strong, and took over to establish a dynasty when very strong. The distinction between nomads and city dwellers was key to the culture and ecology of the ancient world in hubs of civilization like India, China, or the Arab Muslim world. Something that people today can hardly understand, as the vast majority of the world is now hyper-sedentary, urban, and under the tight control of nation-states. To truly comprehend the history of the old world, it's essential to decenter ourselves and grasp the significance of this divide. Unlike ancient times, we live in a world that we perceive as finite. In our age, the entire planet has been explored and mapped, and is instantly accessible via modern communication and transport, something that was unfathomable in the 15th century. The concept of empire back then was something completely unique, and unlike what is known today. For most ancient people, there was the empire and its sphere of influence, and anything beyond was inferior, barbaric, or unknown, out of the control of the state, and mostly unexplored. Ibn Khaldun and Sima Qian both recognized that an empire's purpose is not to start wars but to maintain peace. Empires would defend themselves against nomadic tribes, with strong asabiya or group feeling hardened by the desert or steppes, and sometimes would even incorporate these tribes by bribing them with wealth. This imperial opulence and luxury would serve to weaken the asabiya, thus perpetuating the cycle of history. An empire, for the two historians, is the guardian of civilization, in a constant social deal or social contract with its subjects. The empire collects taxes and provides in exchange military protection, which allows subjects to produce wealth and gain in economic productivity in peace. These economic gains enable empires to collect more taxes and increase their accumulated wealth, which, ironically, is increasingly a temptation for barbarian tribes. Indeed, why is military protection necessary? Because by their very nature, luxurious empires produce envy and jealousy between human beings, resulting in the need for armies, in order to protect from the barbarians out of the borders. In a way, the existence of an empire inevitably implies the existence of barbarians, and vice versa. It's worth noting that, for pre-modern emperors and rulers, the greatest danger was rarely from another empire. Instead, the most pressing issue was the threat of barbarian incursion along the border. This was reflected in the Chinese language, where the same character Cheng was used to denote both cities, Chengshi, and castles, Chengbao. Cheng itself was derived from the radical tu, meaning earth, highlighting the connection between a city and its land. Also, contrasting with today's urban landscape, pre-modern cities were isolated from each other and capable of surviving only with adequate fortifications and an army. The most extreme example, the Great Wall of China, Changcheng, meaning long wall, was a testament of the importance of imperial walls and was initially built for the Qin dynasty, before being further expanded, notably by the Ming, to contain barbarian intrusions from the Xiongnu and later the Mongols. Ibn Khaldun also recognized the significance of city walls, quote-unquote. Sedentary people find full assurance of safety in the walls that surround them and the fortifications that protect them. No noise disturbs them, and no hunting occupies them. They are carefree and trusting, and have ceased to carry weapons. Successive generations have grown up in this way of life. They have become like women and children, who depend upon the master of the house. Eventually, this has come to be a quality of character that replaces fitra, or natural disposition. End of quote. Sima Qian and Ibn Khaldun saw the empire not simply as a political entity among others, but as a unique, self-sustaining world. It was the world, with unchanging customs, a powerful ruler, and a geography of urban centers and untamed wilderness around them. They viewed the empire as the only center of civilization with no equals. Sima Qian associated this concept with the Han dynasty, believing China was the main source of power in the world, with the foreign Xiongnu tribes on the outer edges. This line of thinking is still seen today with the name Zhongguo, meaning central state, meaning China, sometimes translated as the Empire of the Middle. Historically, ancient China was not seen as one center of civilization, but the center of civilization, which no other people could aspire to match, quote-unquote. All the barbarians of the distant west craned their neck to the east and longed to catch a glimpse of China, end of quote. Similarly, Ibn Khaldun saw the Dar al-Islam, although in decline at his time, as its own world, a space of peace and submission to Allah's law, despite being ruled by multiple political entities and petty kings. This realm stretched from Al-Andalus to Southeast Asia, from West Africa to Western China. Beyond their borders lay the realms of infidels, pagans, barbarians, a stark contrast to the Dar al-Islam, quote-unquote. Evil is the quality that is closest to man when religion is not used as the model to improve him. The great mass of mankind is in that condition, with the exception of those to whom Allah gives success. Evil qualities in man are injustice and mutual aggression. He who casts his eyes upon the property of his brother will lay his hand upon it to take it, unless there is a restraining influence to hold him back. End of quote. Ibn Battuta, the Maghribi traveler who had journeyed to many realms of the known world, mostly within the domain of Muslim culture, was truly taken aback by the cultural shock he encountered when he crossed out of Muslim lands and experienced the exotic, unfamiliar cultures of places like China, quote-unquote. China was beautiful, but it did not please me. On the contrary, I was greatly troubled thinking about the way paganism dominated this country. Whenever I went out of my lodging, I saw many blameworthy things. That disturbed me so much that I stayed indoors most of the time, and only went out when necessary. During my stay in China, whenever I saw any Muslims, I always felt as though I was meeting my own family and close kinsmen. End of quote. This reveals how jihad is an integral part of Islam, and its true purpose is not to force people to convert, as it goes against the principle of no compulsion when it comes to religion. Instead, it is used to ensure the laws and justice of Allah are in effect, either through persuasion or force. Contemporary Western leaders and activists, in a similar manner, can be seen as enforcing their liberal, secular, democratic model on other societies. And anyone who does not fit into their concept of human rights and individualism is deemed as backward or barbaric. The West and its satellites are seen as civilized, in contrast with the so-called backwardness of the rest of the world. In essence, civilization and barbarians, sedentary empires and nomads are two sides of the same coin. Civilization and barbarism are inextricably linked, One must exist in comparison to the other, like light and darkness. Let's have a deeper look at that dichotomy through Sima Qian and Ibn Khaldun's own eyes, starting with Barbarians.